Okay, so now's the fun part. Now is when I get to work on the machines and make the machines better. The reason why I chose these machines is because I know they won't rust because they're aluminum and they have an anodized coating on them. They're pretty tough. I've put this machine through a lot of hell and it still works. And they have a pretty solid frame. So you're not going to get a lot of vibration. You're not going to worry about bending these. You're not going to worry about them rusting on you. Pretty solid machine. But they're set up as a liner. So you're going to get a good liner out of this, but it's going to be difficult to get anything else out of this. But if you need a good liner, these are good machines. And especially for a beginner. So let me show you one of the issues. This is a tension gauge, and people will argue that you don't need one of these. You can just go by feel. If you know what you're doing, that's true. But if you don't know what you're doing, you can always use a tension gauge to see how your machines are set up compared to other people's machines. Or if you get a really expensive machine and you want to know or fix it, let's say your springs break and you want to fix it. So maybe before it breaks, if you could test it out and see where your tension is at, when you fix it, you can put it back at the same tension. Or you can go around and check all your machines and see what tension works best for you for a liner, shader, whatnot, and then you can adjust. So this will kind of give you an idea, let you know how things are, and then you can go from there. So if you're wondering why your cheap machine is heating up, this could be a real good reason. This is how it came. The tension on this machine is close to 700 or more. You can see that. What you do is you take your tension gauge and you push down on your armature bar until it touches the front core. And this is close to about 700, so this is maxed out. There's a lot of tension. What this is checking is how much tension it takes to pull down on this rear spring. You're not checking the front spring. Front spring has nothing to do with this. When it pulls down right here, it's just checking how much tension is back here. So 700 is a lot of tension, which means that your cores have to work a lot to pull this down. You have to turn up your voltage to make the magnet stronger, which more voltage means more heat, and so your machine overheats. That's what's happening. What you have to do is take some of that tension off of there. I'll show you a machine I've been using for a while, and the spring tension on this is about 400. That's a lot less than 600. Now, another thing you want to check is how much of a gap you have between your rear core and your armature bar. You don't need a lot. You just need a little bit. So I'm going to get out my tools here, and this, you can see, has very little gap, and that's what we want. If you can fit a dime back here, that's way too much gap. The further away the piece of metal is from your magnet, the harder the magnet has to pull. So if you have a really huge gap back here, your magnets, your cores are going to have to pull harder. You have to turn up your volts. Get rid of that gap, and you don't need as much because it's closer to the metal, pulls easier. Now you do not want it to touch, because what happens is with a magnet, it has a little residual effect. If both of these touch, it's going to hold on to that and it's not going to let go. It's going to kind of grab it. So leaving that little gap there kind of gets it to let go easier. So your machine again doesn't have to work as hard. So if you don't have a gap there, it's going to work harder. If you have too much of a gap there, it's going to work harder. You just need a little bit of a gap in this back area here for it to work correctly. Just enough so that it doesn't grab a hold of this and it lets go when you need it to let go. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've removed the cores from the machine. You can see I put a rubber band on them. This way that your cores don't move around and you're going to break your wire. There's a little tiny wire right here and right here that isn't covered by shrink wrap. It's just a bare wire. You can see it on a lot of your tattoo machines, especially these cheapies right here. As soon as this wire touches your machine frame, especially if you have a metal machine frame, it shorts out your machine and your machine will not run. And if you take this off, that wire is going to be the first wire to break. So what you do is you get some silicone, just some clear silicone, and you put it over that wire. You don't put it over where you're going to screw in your cores, just along the outside, and cover that little wire right there. And you can see on this one, I've had this like this for years and it stays pretty good. And that will protect that wire. Whenever you take it off, you won't have to worry about that wire breaking. You don't have to worry about that wire touching your frame. It'll keep the rust from getting underneath there and rusting that out. So on your cheap machines, a little bit of silicone down there will help you out a lot. And on these, I'm going to go ahead and stuff some of the steel wool into the core, because you don't want a lot of air in there. The more metal you have, the stronger your cores will be. So we only want enough room for your screw to go in there and fill up that space. We want a solid space. So what I've done is taken that steel wool, and you kind of have to break it down into small pieces. Get a small piece, ball it up so it's small enough to shove down in there. And then you put it in there and you cram it in as tight as possible, fill in that space. And you fill up that space until you only have enough room for your screw to go in there. But remember too, you have your frame here, you have your yoke, and then your screw goes in there. So don't pack it too much. You know, go a little bit at first and just keep adding a little bit until you get enough so your screw fits in there nice and tight and fills up that space. As we go through this machine here and fix this machine, we're going to be checking the gaps. So a couple of tools that will help you will be a gapping tool like this for spark plugs. Or you can use some feeler gauge stock like this, which will tell you how wide your gaps are. Even this bigger stuff here you can use. So you have feeler gauge stock, you have a gapping tool, and you also have, because a lot of tattoo artists use these measurements, a nickel, a dime, and a quarter. And that will come in handy for setting up your tattoo machine and tuning it correctly. And you also can use a tension gauge. All of these are tools to help you tune your machine.